Founder and CEO of Integer LLC. Sandra, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about tariffs and what that could mean for the inflationary picture. Just curious in terms of if you saw the inflation print earlier today, your thoughts on some of the stickiness that we've been seeing in terms of inflation here in the U.S. and how big of a problem you think that is even before tariffs.
Sure. So while it's seemingly nudging down, as you said, it's still very sticky. The Fed may have to continue to reduce rates in order to see that unstickiness. Tariffs are going to be a really big problem, though. As we see and as consumers see inflation and prices coming down, those tariffs could really nudge us back in the wrong direction because tariffs are taxes. And if those tariffs on consumer goods coming from abroad are steep enough and broad enough, people are going to feel them in their pocketbooks when they go to the grocery stores. Small businesses are going to feel them when they're trying to buy goods for their businesses. Large companies are going to feel them. Worse
so talk to me
is
about
that. Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, worse is that once we start imposing tariffs, other countries are likely to retaliate, which means our own U.S. companies' goods going abroad are going to be more expensive and as a result, less likely to be purchased.
Okay, so how realistic of a problem do you think this is heading into next year? Because we have seen Trump as president before. We have seen a trade war with China before. Obviously, COVID kind of derailed all of that, but there are still tariffs in place at this point. So do you look at this? We had a guest on earlier today calling it kind of just bluster at this point, or do you look at this as a real threat?
I think we have to look at this as a real threat. Yesterday, Trump called for 25% tariffs on everything coming in from Canada and Mexico, and an additional 10% on goods coming from abroad from China. And you have to look at some of the retailers ahead of what they expect to be a very busy shopping season. And retailers like Walmart and Target and Macy's and Best Buy, they're hoping for a really robust shopping season. But if consumers think the tariffs are going to drive up prices from our three major trading partners shortly after the new year, they may pull back on their shopping this season, which could really dampen not just the holiday season, but our fourth quarter numbers.
So do you expect these, obviously we have some time before these tariffs would actually take effect, so might not impact Q4, but do you expect these higher prices to be passed on to the consumer, or do you think that this is something that the companies will have to absorb like they did previously when prices were higher?
Great question. I think that historically, a lot of those increases are passed on to consumers. Some of the companies do pay for it because they just can't hike prices so dramatically. But what we've seen is that a lot of these tariffs, a lot of these taxes are passed on to consumers. And I think that is what's troubling, particularly for an electorate that voted in Republicans because they said they were going to bring down prices and bring down inflation. So it is not a great sign.
What's the takeaway for investors at this point?
Yeah, I think that if you are in retail right now and heading into retail, I would be very concerned because that is what these tariffs are going to target: consumer goods, all of those wonderful Amazon packages sitting on our doorsteps. All of that has the potential to increase as tariffs get slapped on some of these countries. So I think that it is a buyer beware when it comes to the investors.
Okay. So what are the broader economic implications? Because we've talked a lot about at this show that the consumer has remained resilient even despite these price pressures. But if prices tick even higher, that could pressure a consumer that's already under pressure, if you will. So do you think that this could lead what's been a very resilient economy into a recession?
It could. If retailers pass on these higher prices to consumers, it could cause them to pull back. It could cause them to pull back even in the fourth quarter with the notion that at some point prices are going to go higher. And so they have to pull back now in the anticipation of higher prices down the road. I'd be very interested to see what happens with consumers during this holiday season. Are they reacting to all of this tariff talk? Or do they think that this is just positioning by the incoming administration, a negotiating position? So down the road, they'll have more leverage with some of these countries.
Okay, well, we'll get some more insight in the coming weeks. Sandra Swirski, founder and CEO of Integer LLC, thank you so much.